Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning into the Ideation podcast again. I'm super excited today for this opportunity to really interview a really good friend of mine. His name is Chris Marlow. Chris is a writer, speaker, founder of Help One Now, and author of Doing Good is Simple, Making a Difference Right Where You Are. More than a decade ago in Zimbabwe, Chris met a starving child who was orphaned, living in an abandoned gas station that helped launch the idea and spirit behind Help One Now. Now, Help One Now is an organization that empowers families in developing countries through high-capacity local leaders with proven solutions to end extreme poverty. Chris now dedicates his life to seeking justice by empowering leaders and organizing tribes to launch global movements that do good. Chris is a member of the Forbes Nonprofit Council and is also a sought-out speaker at conferences including TedX, Plywood People. He's been with us at Ideation Conference, Together for Adoption, and the White House's gathering of Innovators Doing Good. Hey, Chris, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with us.
Hey, Charles, are you tired now after that bio?
That's pretty impressive, man.
I hope it's all real, but no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, thank you for having me, man. So excited to be here with you and your community today.
Well, Chris, I have a long list of questions that I can ask you. I've known you for over a decade now, and I've
Yeah.
seen you lead an organization from its infancy, from its conception, all the way over 10 years now, and leading a nonprofit doing good all around the world. What I love about Help One Now is that, in your mission statement, you talk about really serving people around the world through high capacity local leaders. And I think that's a distinguishing mark for Help One Now. And that's why, I've been personally involved over the years as well. And I love that unique approach because Help One Now is committed not so much to show up and solve problems for other people in some of these developing countries, but you actually work through local leaders. Tell me a little bit about the background around that concept and what you found over the years to be its its benefits as well as some of its challenges in working with local leaders.
Yeah, Charles, I think, it's fascinating. When I first started Help One Now, I took about a year to do research, and I traveled to places, went to Zimbabwe, met the kid, had this aha moment. Why are kids dying every 6 seconds in our world? Because, they lack access to food or water or sanitation. So as I did this research project and traveled throughout Africa, and one of the moments that really struck me hard, I was in Egypt, and I was just really spending time with the most brilliant leaders. I just couldn't believe the capacity of these leaders. And what fascinated me is we had a conversation, and one of these Egyptian leaders simply asked me a question. He says, "Hey, why do you think Americans feel like they have to lead all the time?" And that question just stuck with me. And through that year, I kept wrestling. And everywhere I would go, I would almost always see an outsider making the decisions. And I thought true innovation can only happen through the local community, through the local leadership, because the locals know the history, the connection, they understand all the different layers. And there's no way I can enter their story and understand the depth of culture that they know how to master and how to deal with and how to navigate. And so I began to ask a question, and I spent time with anyone and everyone who would listen to me. And I would say, what if we started a nonprofit, but we were invisible, and the local leaders were the hero of the story? And most of them would always say, that's almost impossible. It's just not going to work. Donors won't trust it. You don't know, all of these reasons. But I thought, well, I have nothing to lose. And I remember one time a CEO of one of the largest development organizations says, "Hey, are you willing to fail? And if you're willing to fail, then try to innovate, because this could be a gift to all of us." And that was just a moment for me to say, okay, we're starting to Help One Now. It's 2008. I didn't think we'd make it anyhow. The economy is falling apart. I mean, we're like, no one's supposed to start a nonprofit and make it in 2008. So I thought, hey, let's go for it. And the return on investment of that decision is so massive, because there's nothing more beautiful when you recognize the most brilliant people are doing some of the hardest work in the world. And really the missing piece of the puzzle was they needed a community to do the work with them, but they needed that community to stay in the shadows, and they needed a community to allow them to flourish and to thrive. But they were missing two key pieces. Typically, one was data. They didn't have the data resources
Hmm.
because of how life is navigated in the countries they were living in, especially in 2008. They were just coming online to more of a global connection digitally. And then two, of course, they needed a spark. They needed resources to kind of get their vision launched. And so Help One Now did everything in our power to help, provide those two things to these leaders. And I think the biggest impact that it's had, Charles, is to simplify it. Every single dollar that we send across the world, because of local leadership, they're going to expand that dollar. They're going to times 10 it. Where if I was
Right.
leading and making those decisions, it would be like a times 3 maybe. And so just the impact we've been able to have, it's also helped us in powerful ways. We have a very lean Help One Now team. We run this global program in 8 countries with 10 staff members,
Mm.
but we have hundreds upon hundreds of local leaders and their team who are executing the work each and every day. So what it's given us the ability to do is focus more on direct impact work and less in operational capacity. So we have no office, we have no cars, we have no logos. We're literally spending all of our resources on building capacity for our team and our leaders around the world.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like you need a very high level of trust and some type of process through which you could identify, high capacity leaders.
Yeah.
Why do you think, like, I mean, is it that it's just it sounds like it takes quite a bit of time to build that type of relationship of
Yeah.
trust. Do you feel like
Yes.
those are kind of the barriers why other organizations may not do this, or is it more of, I think way back when, where, we used to think, maybe some of us in the U.S. still do, that we're the center of the universe
Yeah.
and we have
Yeah.
all the solutions and answers. Like, what are some of the mental barriers or the
Yeah.
tactical barriers of actually implementing a model like this?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating as I kind of remember those moments where we're making these really massive, decisions that are really the heartbeat and mission of Help One Now. I think a few things happen. One, there's been such a our world has definitely become, more community driven. We're definitely
Right.
connected to each other through digital, through travel. And I think what we've been able to see is, nonprofits that maybe, they started in the 60s or 70s, there was a massive disconnect between, a stateside, American nonprofit and, a leader in the middle of the
Mhm.
country in Africa or Asia. Like the communication was far different. I think technology, and this is the beauty of startups and why we need to really encourage every generation to have their startup moments, because every time a generation has a moment, they can, they can make decisions and create innovation in ways that older organizations simply can't do,
That's
because
right.
those opportunities weren't even on the table for them. And so it's not even like when the CEO of a $150 million nonprofit told me to take the risk and do it because it would be a gift to all. I think what he was really saying was like, this wasn't possible when they started, in
Right.
1957 or whatever, but it was possible in 2008. And so a little bit is every generation kind of takes the baton to the next step possible. And I think Help One Now, one of the gifts that we're trying to give is like, okay, we want, now here's where the big key is. Now we all have access to this. And so one of the things we want to do is like, hey, it's a proven solution. Local leaders are by far the most valuable asset we have around the world. They are so brilliant.
Mhm.
It's the best way to end poverty, in my opinion, is to empower the locals. And really, empower is a bad word, to partner with locals. But really, what also it's done, Charles, is like the dignity side of this is so important. Like it's created such confidence and such progress in these local communities. You can't even put a data point to how people feel when a white male walks into a community and says, "Okay, I'm serving you."
Mm.
And that they're like, they don't know what to do with that. They're like, what do you, and so it creates this massive trust between the local leader and the organization. And I think that's just something that we've been able to really embrace. And typically it takes anywhere from 2 to 5 years to develop a relationship where there's enough trust to invest significant amount of money. So we'll start small and we'll just do a couple small projects. And then one of the things you recognize quickly is most of our leaders around the world, their leadership teams that they've built are so amazing. And so we're able to just really do significant work because we slow it down, we create trust, and then we speed it up. And when we speed it up, it's really just, it's so much fun to like step back and watch kind of what happens in this collaboration together.
Mm. No, that's good. One of the things that you've done well is listen to your local leaders, collect a lot of data, and allow that data to kind of inform your next decision making. It's birthed a lot of great programs. Talk to us a little bit. I mean, because working with data is not easy. There's multiple layers to it.
Yeah.
You need some tools and technology around it. So tell us a little bit about your approach to data and why you think that's so important, and what has that led to. And I know it's launched a couple of different programs for you.
Yeah, I think, even harking back to the high capacity local leader, one of the things we understand immediately is if they're not a data driven leader, this whole thing won't work
Mm,
because data creates trust. And so our local leaders have to actually love data. And if they love data, then it becomes a really simple process. And so when I think of our family empowerment program that we launched, 4 years ago, it's kind of a pilot program. And now we've kind of adopted it as the mission of the organization. The
mm,
reason we adopted it as the mission of the organization is our local leader in Ethiopia is such a data-driven leader. Like he teaches us on data. He's so
mm,
brilliant on it, and he basically, has brought all this data back, saying, "Hey, here's the impact. Every time we invest $1,000 into a family, there's a increase in wealth by 400%, and we
wow.
now have, 400 to 500 families in the 2 to 3 years I went through this program, and we have that data. And then, the next data point is each one of these families is there's a 96% success rate for each one of the families. So from a Help One Now perspective, data is helping inform decisions and also create innovation. And so then the question we have to ask is maybe one of the most powerful ways to end poverty or to fight poverty is not necessarily to be child focused, but family focused.
Mm,
That wasn't just an emotional decision that we made. That was a data driven decision. It was a decision based on our local leader, Shiloh, saying, hey, the best way we can care for these people around the world is to empower families. And so,
mm,
because of his data tenacity, if you will, we were able to take that data and say, this is actually a more effective solution to ending poverty than a traditional child sponsorship program. And it's not that the child sponsorship program isn't a good thing. If it's done
right.
well, it can definitely be a beautiful story. We've done it for 10 years now. But to me, the child sponsorship program data points are this will basically help a child stabilize a child. The family empowerment data points is this will actually um, end poverty in these communities, end generational poverty in these families. It will empower the local family to be more
Mm,
generous in their community. So then we don't actually need kids in the child sponsorship program anymore because we have entrepreneurs who are thriving and flourishing. And all of that was me looking at data points saying, wow, the data is a proven solution that we
mm.
needed to make this key pivot as an organization.
Yeah, I mean, the the marketing side in me can see definitely challenges. I know we've had conversations in the past.
Mm.
Is that there is and not to say other organizations do with any type of malintent or anything like that, but
No, not at
taking
all. Yeah.
away the marketable storytelling aspect of helping a child, which is, it connects with people
Yep.
so
Yep.
quickly, and turning that narrative into, hey, let's help families launch businesses, let's help them become self-sustaining. I think from a, definitely a reasonable, like, logic perspective, it makes a lot more sense, and it feels like it's
Sure.
more sustainable change. But it, practically speaking, that's a risk you took, because
Yeah.
shifting and pivoting on that could have ramifications of people who are giving towards the organization that may not have that type of layered thinking.
Yeah.
Have you
Absolutely.
found people like quickly adopting to that and pivoting to that,
Yeah.
or what has that been like over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, it's been powerful to let the data speak, and
Yeah,
data speaks in volumes, right? And people can see the data.
yeah,
Two, I think we have a hungry community looking for new ways to solve poverty around the world.
yeah,
And they're looking for this. And so what we got to understand is our target market, is it going to be maybe a traditional market, because they're going to just they're going to connect more with the heart side of it. So we really have to build a community of people that definitely are heart driven but also data driven, and they're
yeah.
going to want to be like, wait a minute, every time I give $1, I want to make the greatest impact possible. And so with trust and transparency, I think we've had to create a niche of people that have said, hey, will you pilot this program with us? And then I think a really important key to this is we've had influencers who, have influenced, their community, who then promote, kind of this new way of thinking.
Mm,
And then that helps create trust on down into their communities. And so a little bit of it's how we've all worked together. Our local leaders, Help One Now team, influencers have taken some of these data points even and said, hey, wait a minute, this is something worth investing in. And
right.
now, after the pilot program, we kind of have the proof that it works. Then yeah, it's much easier now, but it's still complicated because the challenge every nonprofit faces, and really every business faces, right, is you have to have such a simple, powerful message because you only have moments for people to make a decision. And so when you enter into these moments, like, how do you keep it so simple? And I think, this is one of the things we've talked about for a decade, Charles. And I've always said, how do we keep it so simple your grandma can understand it? And so, there's this complicated battle that we're all facing, but at the end of the day, the marketing does have to be simple. And so we knew we couldn't take that to the masses, so we had to prototype it to a more intimate community. And this is also the importance of understanding, as you build an organization, you can do things in year 10 that you could have never did in year 1. And so now
Right.
we have this trusted community of people that we can go to and say, hey, you've been partnering with us for years. We feel like we have another important step to take as an organization. Will you support us through the research and development phase? And here's the challenge we all have, and especially nonprofits. No one knows how to help nonprofits do research and development. But
Mm,
nonprofits are some of the most critical elements to society, right? They're solving some of the world's
so
greatest
true.
problems, but there's not a research, and the margins are thinner. And so most nonprofits don't want to advance because they're so scared as they advance, it may fall apart. And that's just a challenge we all face in our kind of world.
Yeah, and hopefully donors continue to evolve in our own thinking about what it takes to run an organization. I felt for years one of the attractions to Help One Now is you are pretty transparent about where you're investing your time and your resources. And one of the areas is in research and development. And I feel like in order to create sustainable organizations, you have to invest money into areas for long-term growth, and you guys have done that really well. Tell me a little bit about, I mean, obviously we're in a very interesting season that's really unprecedented,
Yeah,
and crisis is a part of just living in this world.
yeah,
And especially when you think about massive global, whether it's a pandemic or
yeah.
a natural disaster, you guys have kind of been through a lot of things, from the Haiti earthquake to famine, to so many different areas. Tell me a little bit about like leading a nonprofit organization through crisis, both at a macro level, or if you have an example of something that's happened in the day to day as well. But tell us some of the things you've learned over time about leading others through crisis.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, most nonprofits Help One Now for sure. We, from the Civil War almost in 2007, Zimbabwe, to the Haiti earthquake,
Mm,
like we thrive off engaging crisis scenarios. Our entire day-to-day reality is we have a crisis going somewhere all the time.
mm,
This is the first time, Charles, where the crisis has hit everybody at the same time. I mean,
yeah.
it's hit Help One Now. My wife's out of a job. She can't open up, her business right now because of social distancing. So to, our entire donor base, advocates, every single person has been affected. All of our leaders are dealing with COVID in their communities, as well. And so like and the beauty of it all is there's a shared experience that we've never had together. We're all experiencing this pain and the suffering together as a community.
Mm,
The frustrating thing is we're all experiencing it together. So we're all, to an extent, we can be paralyzed if we're not careful. And so a little bit of my thinking was, when COVID became a reality that it was going to shift the entire year, at least for Help One Now, I think on a macro level, the first thing we did was make two key decisions. How do we keep the most important programming up and running? And
mhm,
how do we secure all of the key players in Help One Now's ecosystem? And what that means
mm,
for us is our local leaders and their teams, and of
mm,
course our stateside Help One Now team. And so the first 2 weeks, we made probably 20 or 30 major decisions to basically make sure there was security long term. for the organization and for the mission of the organization. And once we did that, and a lot of that was cutting, cutting a lot of innovation, cutting that we were really excited to get to. And and I think this is really important. I've had to mourn the loss of vision that we were going to get to this year. And I think every leader right now on a macro level, it's okay to mourn that loss, because like Charles, you and I are both huge baseball fans. We have a Major League Baseball community really involved in Help One Now. And like, I was just so sad when I wasn't with our folks in their stadiums promoting the work of Help One Now in partnership with them. And like, instead, I'm stuck at home, on a Zoom call 1,000 times a day. That was a real mourning for me, because I was so excited to push the vision of Help One Now forward. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to build organizations that last beyond our lifetime. So I had to take a step back and say, okay, what's the foundation we need to really endure the current scenario, but also thrive in the future? And so we're zooming in, zooming out. Every decision, we just are zooming in. Will this secure us in the moment to get through the crisis? But also on the other side of the crisis, can we thrive and flourish? Now we're at the point, we did this high five campaign that kind of secured emergency fundraising for all issues related to COVID in all of our communities in like a 3-week period.
That's amazing.
And that gave us a space to think big picture. And so now, first week of May, as we're talking now, we've got about 6 weeks of COVID behind us. For the first time, we're able to really think, wait, there's an opportunity to innovate. There's an opportunity to take ground. And so one thing I will encourage everyone, cash is king. And so you have to keep making sure you're bringing cash into the organization. When I talk to nonprofit leaders, they're really anyone, any business right now, this is not the moment to just sit and do nothing. This is the moment to advance the mission and to make sure you're basically securing cash flow. And so a lot of it, don't do the slow death trip, because ultimately if you just hang on, this COVID reality and ramifications, it's going to last a lot more than 2 or 3 months. It's going to be, for us, we're already seeing impact into 2021. And so I think it's really important to, one, secure funding immediately, but also think through how do you advance progress long-term. And then on the other side of COVID, we feel like Help One Now can be positioned better to fulfill our mission as an organization if we do the right things between now and then. So I have more hope now than ever, but I've had to give myself permission to mourn kind of what we've lost this year in terms of vision and progress.
No, that's really good. Now, because we're in a unique season, obviously, like fundraising has been impacted. You also mentioned, your connection with like the Major League Baseball community, and you also have Help One Now has always had these great connections with quote unquote influencers or those who have reach. Apart from a crisis, I'd love to dive in a little bit into that topic too, because I know nonprofits see other nonprofits that are connected with people who have voices or reach. What are some lessons you've learned in working with those who are higher profile, engaging them and working with them? What's that experience been like?
I think it's fascinating. I think, when it comes to influencers and donors, when we think of fundraising, I think we think we're going to go sit down and I'm going to ask someone for money, $500 or 5,000 or 50,000 or 500,000, whatever the money is. And really fundraisers, our job is to inspire people to see a better world and then to help them find their place in the story. And when, for some people that's writing massive checks, for some people that's being advocates, so some people that's using their gifts or talents, to advance the mission in other ways. And so I think the most important critical key to fundraising is invite people into a story, show them a better world and how they can help make the world better. And so for influencers, for our donor base, we've seen an amazing act of generosity the first 6 weeks of COVID. We've seen some of the most generous moments we've ever seen. And they're sacrificing and they're communicating, hey, we don't know what the future looks like. Q3, Q4 may be very different. But for now, we want to give and stabilize. Here's the key to that. If you fundraise with a heart, and if you really care for the people who are giving, they're going to take care of you in the hardest times. They are going to sacrifice for the mission because it's a shared mission. I'm the founder of Help One Now, but I'm only one tiny piece of a large puzzle. And these other folks have invested much of their time and energy into helping see the vision of Help One Now come alive. So it's a shared vision, and we have to respect the fact that it's not just my vision, it's our vision. And together as a community, we'll find a way through the most critical times. On the influencer side, man, this is an amazing moment to have influencers for sure, because they can really help keep people centered in the midst of chaos. Because people are like, who do I listen to? Who do I pay attention to? Who's
Mm.
going to guide me through the crisis? And so influencers typically can help guide their people through the crisis. And everything that we know about influencers is twofold. They want to be treated as humans because they really see themselves as very normal people.
Right.
But they also want to take advantage of the opportunities they have in order to make a difference in the world. And that's one of the gifts that we give to our influencers. Like, hey, if you're a pro athlete, if you're a musician, if you're, an author with a large following, this is a way that you can use your influence to make a real difference in the world. So really, it's an act of collaboration. We don't want to just use them to be a marketing piece for Helping Now. We want to partner together to advance the mission of the organization, where we both feel really good about the overall experience. And this is one of the reasons why I think most of our influencers have stayed with us for a decade now. Some of them is because they do have a shared mission in the organization. It's so easy for a nonprofit to just use an influencer and see, oh, you have this opportunity, do
Right.
this thing for me, let's raise some money. And then, so a little bit of it, and I think, is we just have to nurture the relationship and help create win-win scenarios for both people. And when you do that for a donor or for an influencer, it's really amazing how much trust and how much commitment that the community will have together. And really, we call it the circle. Internally, we call it the circle of empowerment. Our local leaders, the Help One Now team and board, and our influencers and donor base. And if you break one of those things breaks off, then the whole thing kind of gets messed up. And so they all have equal footing in many ways in the mission.
That's good. That's good. Well, I know we only have a few minutes left, so I wanted to close with a couple of questions for you. One is, as long as I've known you, you've been an avid reader, learner. I see a lot of your Instagram posts, and it usually involves
Yeah.
some type of book.
Yep.
And so, like,
Every morning.
yeah, every morning. So let us know, like, what are the things that kind of built that habit into you? Because in
Mm.
some ways, like, books are becoming less commonplace for some leaders.
Yeah.
And yet I know probably some of the most dynamic leaders, they're all committed to reading. And
Yeah.
so one is like, how did you build that practice? And two, what are some books you're reading now that um, have helped kind of shape your thinking in this time?
Yeah, I think it's funny. Yesterday I was cleaning out because of COVID. We have a little extra time. We're doing some spring cleaning. Yesterday after work, and I found all these CDs, and it was from the John Maxwell Enjoy Club,
Uh-huh.
if you remember that, way back in the day. And Nicole, my wife's like, "What are we going to do with these CDs?" I'm like, "I don't know what to do with them," but it did call back to even as a young 20-something. I invested money into learning. One of my greatest fears is to be average. Like, it's really something that drives me.
Mm.
It just is a very scary thing to me, because I think the best gift we can give as neighbors to each other is to fulfill our greatest potential. And so I feel like in my own self, I'm constantly challenging myself to always elevate my game and not comparing it to anyone else. Like, you want to be comfortable in your own shoes. But for me personally, how do I become the best possible leader? And I think that's one of the greatest gifts I can give, to this moment of life that I have on earth. And so reading and learning have always been such a core part of who I am. Also, I've realized when I'm not reading and learning, I get mentally off. And so part
Mm.
of even my mental health care is to make sure I'm reading and learning across kind of all different, the whole entire ecosystem. I like to learn from a lot of different folks. Two of my favorite books recently is Ryan Holiday's book, Stillness is the Key. It's so
Mm.
brilliant. I mean, Ryan has become just really one of the most thoughtful. He kind of became well known from the Stoic philosophy work. But if you don't read Ryan, I would read him immediately. And then Infinite Game by Simon Sinek.
All
And I
right.
think the thing that's amazing about Simon's book, especially in the midst of COVID and especially with Help One Now, is like it reminded me of kind of Jim Collins' 20 Mile March. Like, if you want to, entrepreneurs aren't trying to microwave success. They understand long-term success is going to take, I mean, you've been doing ideation now for 10, 11, 12 years. It takes a long time to be really successful. And I think what differentiates most entrepreneurs is they understand there's a long battle. Actually, for a long time, an entrepreneur will always say, you know what, I'm really good at this for 2 or 3 years and I'm going to bail on to something else. And I think now what we're seeing is
Right.
like, actually, if you want to create something great, you got to be committed to the long run, and whatever that looks like for everyone. And so I think reading and learning just constantly keeps us on our A game, keeps us thinking about new things, keeps us learning from one another, from multiple different disciplines, and then you can apply that into kind of like the day to day or into the organization. So if you're too busy to read, you probably won't lead very well.
Hmm. That's good. Well, how can those listening to this podcast or watching it connect with the work of Help One Now? Is there something like, if people are asking, is there something like practical I can do? How do I
Yep.
get involved?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we have a plethora of ways to get involved. And one of the most important pieces of the puzzle for us is this thing called the circle, and it's basically this monthly giving community, and we want to circle around families around the world to ensure that they are able to go through the biz launch program and they can chase their dreams. And so the circle is this really powerful monthly community of people. You pick your pathway. It could be 20 bucks a month, 40 bucks a month, $400 a month. You kind of get to pick or choose. And I think one of the powerful realities right now in the midst of COVID is like, donors want a starting point where they can kind of get to know the organization and figure out how much we'll care for them. And so we wanted to give donors a kind of a pick your own scenario where
Mm,
they can jump on board, but also they can get to see the direct impact that will happen around the world. And then donors will always elevate their game. And so oftentimes when we're asking people to donate, we want them to start at level 8. And what we're saying is like, hey, we've created this thing called the circle. It's really powerful. The impact is data driven, so you'll get a chance to see it,
mhm.
but you can jump in at whatever level you want to jump into. So if you go to helponeNow.org, the circle is the first thing you'll see in the website, and it kind of has all the key information. But we would love for you to jump on board and check us out and see the impact that we can make together around the world.
Great. Well, Chris, thank you so much for all the work you're doing around the world. Thanks for joining us on this podcast, and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Charles. Appreciate you.